Hello, my name is Fred Lambert. I'm an instructional assistant at the Communications Student Support Center at Valencia College's Winter Park campus. Today I'm going to be going over how to craft a well-rounded thesis statement for your academic essays. Now, what is a thesis statement? Essentially, it is the sentence in your essay that basically sums up the main idea of the entire work. It's the pivotal part of an essay. Now, what we mean by that is essentially the thesis statement is the focus of your essay, and without a good thesis statement, you really won't have a good essay. A thesis should basically identify the topic of the essay and the writer's attitude, opinion, idea, or point of view about this particular topic. And it's essentially the anchor of the essay. Like I said, if you don't have a good thesis statement, then your body paragraphs really won't have anything to focus on. We'll get into that here in a second. Now, here's some helpful hints. Thesis statements typically are located at the end of the introductory paragraph. In the introductory paragraph, you'll identify the topic and eventually lead up into this statement. Now, considering the length of the paper, 1 to 2 sentences for a thesis statement is usually sufficient. A lot of professors would prefer it to be 1, and I would even say that if you can't reduce your main idea down into 1 sentence, then it's probably not focused enough, and we'll get to that. But some professors also accept a 2-sentence thesis, especially if it's a complex idea, but in the long run you want to check with your professor and see what their preference is, because they'll be the one grading your essay. Also, use specific and concrete language. I think there's a tendency sometimes for students to keep things vague and too general because they're a little bit insecure about the point that they're trying to make. And this is a mistake. You want the reader to be absolutely clear about what your main idea is. For instance, you wouldn't want to state a question as your thesis statement because this is totally not concrete. You're the one conveying information to the student, and I would really recommend to avoid asking any questions in your thesis statement unless you're willing to answer them immediately after stating the question. Other things to avoid when writing your thesis statement: don't make announcements. Instead of saying, I will now discuss how the French Revolution was a bloody affair, you can just say the French Revolution was an excessively bloody affair without the first person framing, and you still get your point across. Also, avoid broad statements such as insects are fascinating creatures. Now, there are so many different types of insects. You could actually write probably an anthology of novels about this particular topic. It's not focused enough. It'll be very difficult to figure out which parts of insects you should be focusing on in a 3 to 5 page academic essay. You also want to avoid statements that are too narrow. For instance, a person must be at least 35 years old to be President of the United States. Now, you can tell when your thesis statement is too narrow because usually these sound like basic facts. And in fact, these are also called dead-end thesis statements because it's very difficult to elaborate on something that is just a basic detail. Really, it's just a supporting detail. Also, try to avoid emphasizing too many ideas in one thesis statement. For instance, teachers have played an important role in my life, but they were not as important as my parents. Now, this just creates a sort of confusion, I think, in the reader because they don't know what this essay is supposed to be about. I mean, obviously it's about teachers and parents, but what's the focused central idea here? And when you have two diverting off like that, that can sort of kill your focus a little bit. Other things to consider, and this is pretty important, when reading your thesis statement, think to yourself, so what? And who cares? Basically, what's the significance of this? Is this something that can be discussed, and will it be interesting to an outside reader? It's very easy to, again, state these vague, feathery sort of thesis statements that really meander a little bit, and then from there it's excessively difficult to keep focused body paragraphs because there's really not a focused thesis statement, and it's not clear what the significance of the thesis statement is. So again, try to use concrete, specific language and be clear about the point that you're trying to make. Another thing to consider is, are your body paragraphs supporting the main idea? Basically, at any point in your essay, when you read something that occurs in the middle of it in the body paragraphs. Ask yourself, is this supporting the central idea? And if it's not, then you're probably getting a little bit, off topic. It's easy to lose focus, especially in first drafts when you're just trying to get all of your thoughts onto paper. So when revising, scrutinize it carefully and make sure that you're not being, not committing any non sequiturs, which is essentially outside observations that really have no bearing on the main focus of your essay. And when it comes to literary analysis, in which you'll basically try to interpret meaning in fictional stories and poetry and whatnot, it's important that you don't just write a book report here with your thesis statement. Don't just say what happened in the plot line of the story, because anyone who reads the story will know what happened in the plot line. So you don't want to just convey those surface details. Consider explaining why what happened in the story happened, based on the evidence and that you see in the story, and this could be metaphors, symbolism, and whatnot, but essentially the interpretations that you make in literary analysis will be centered around how you frame your thesis statement. So within your thesis statement, you should be explaining the significance of occurrences in the story and making claims that you can then dig deeper into the details of and explain in the body paragraphs. And a good thing to do here is, after your first draft, read the whole essay out loud yourself, try to determine what all of the central point of these details are, and make sure that's reflected in a good thesis statement. It's not uncommon to have to rewrite your thesis statement after the entire essay is written. At this point in the video, we'd like to do a little bit of practical application. So consider the following 5 sentences and determine which would make the most well-rounded thesis statement. Pause the video if you have to, and once you've made your determination, go ahead and proceed. Alright, looking up here at the top, the United States of America comprises 50 states. This is far too narrow. It's just a basic fact or a supporting detail, and it would be very difficult to expand this into a 3 to 5 page academic essay. Looking down here at the bottom, there are many elements of American law. This is far too broad, and in fact I think a single novel would have difficulty trying to examine all elements of American law, which is expansive to say the least. Up to the top again, basketball is an awesome sport, and so is football. There's more than one idea being presented here, and even if you were to pare it down to basketball is an awesome sport, I would say that that's probably too broad, and you'd want to focus it down to maybe a specific team or a specific season, something along those lines. Backing down near the bottom again, I will now discuss in detail my summer trip to Scotland. This is an announcement, and in any case, just saying that you went to Scotland over the summer, that could work, but I would try to be a little bit more specific. Something like Scotland during the summertime was an excessively beautiful place along the coastline, and then you can go forward and explain your experiences on Scotland's coast during the summer. And last but not least, in the middle, performing a yoga routine can be beneficial to your physical and mental health in several ways. Now, if you're into the story of the Goldilocks and the 3 bears, you can use the Goldilocks analogy here, and this one is just right. It's not too narrow, it's not too broad, you're not presenting more than one idea, and you're not announcing anything. You're saying a yoga routine can be beneficial to physical and mental health, and in the paragraphs that precede this, you can focus on each benefit and work your way right toward that conclusion of the essay. That concludes our presentation on crafting quality thesis statements for academic writing. For more information on this topic, visit the Winter Park campus's Communication Student Support Center webpage on valenciacollege.edu. This is Fred Lambert, signing off.